Hello, today I'm going to show you how to do square one of the Portuguese towel blanket. I hadn't originally put this up, but clearly it's needed. It should have cream where I've got white, but I've mislaid the cream, so white it is, because I have finished the blanket and very lovely it is too. So, according to the pattern, the starting row is in the green, so slip knot and 5 chain and make a circle. So oop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and join. Alright, it's 8 half trebles into this chain space, and it says don't use a one chain to get you up to height, which is fair enough because it does mean you get a sort of a jog. So half treble, that's one. Now I'm going to mark this first stitch just because it means I know where I'm going to when I join it. So I'm just going to pop a marker in that stitch. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Okay. I'm doing the invisible join because it gives a much neater finish rather than slipping to that stitch. So I'm just going to pull the yarn up, snip, and then you just pull down. And the reason I marked the stitch was so I know which one I'm making. So if you've done the invisible join before, you can just skip ahead, but if you haven't, the invisible join makes the first stitch from the beginning of the row again. So the invisible join, take your thread and you're going to sort of remake that stitch. So this is the stitch that you're remaking, so you go to the next one and go front to back underneath, like that. And then you go back into the stitch that you were in and go from the middle to the back. And when you pull it up, tuck that in, you have the stitch. Okay. And then when you're doing an invisible join, it's not very clear on this one, I'll show you as we go through. This is the stitch you've made, and when you sew your ends in, sew them back over. Don't go this way, go back that way. And I will explain to you when I do an invisible join further on why that is important. Okay, so the next colour is the duck egg. Again, I vary slightly from the pattern because I like to start with a standing stitch rather than chaining, because it gives a much neater finish. So So these are 3 treble clusters. The pattern says to start with a slip stitch to any of the chains and do 3 chains and then the rest of the cluster, but that gives you a very obvious 3 chain at the beginning, whereas these are all, clearly you can see that they're trebles, there's no chains involved. So a standing treble is yarn over before you put it through, insert it into any of the chains. You need more hands. So yarn over, through any of the chains, pull through, and pull. And because you're doing a cluster, you're not going to pull through all the way. So it's 3 chains, 3 trebles, sorry, into the space, pull through halfway, yarn over and pull through, and you should have 4 stitches on your hook. Then you do yarn over and pull through all 4, and there you have a cluster. So then it's 3 chains and repeat. So the cluster, you're pulling through the stitches until you get to the last one. So it's yarn over, into the stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through, don't complete the stitch, yarn over, in, pull through, yarn over through 2, don't complete the stitch, yarn over, into the chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through. Then you've got your 3 trebles on the hook, yarn over, pull through. So 3 chain, treble cluster, 3 treble cluster into the next stitch. 3 chain. So you make a 3 treble cluster into each of the chains from the stitches from the previous row, and I shall meet you back here. Okay, we're now at the end of round 2, and I'm going to show you the invisible join again. So we've got 8 treble clusters with 3 chain spaces between each of them. So I've ended with the 3 chain, and I'm going to join to the top of this cluster. So this is the first stitch of the row, so I'm making that one, so I'm going to the following stitch, front to back, and then back into the back of the last stitch of the chains, and then you pull it until it makes a stitch, and then you pull this one tight, and this is where going back when you're sewing your ends in matters, because here there's no stitch to go into. At the top of this treble cluster you've got that little V, I don't know if you can see it there, so there's the top of the stitch and then the bit down there, so you're making that when you're sewing your end in. So if you go back, there you've got the stitch that you can work into, and then just weave your ends in, probably a little bit more neatly than I'm doing here because this is just for show. Okay, so the next round is in white. Okay, and this is the pattern that you're going to be making here. The pattern says to start in a chain space, work 2 chains because it's a half treble, treble, double treble, treble, half treble, and then a double crochet into the top of the cluster. Again, if you start with the slip, attaching it to a chain space and the 2 chain, you get a chain rather than a stitch. So I start at the top of a cluster and do a standing double crochet into the top of the cluster. So at the top of any cluster, a standing double. Obviously you don't put yarn over because you don't with a normal double, so slip stitch onto your hook, into the stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through both stitches on the hook. And you can pull this a little bit tighter just to make it look neater, and you'll be doing your invisible join to there. So that's your first stitch. So into each chain space you're going to be doing a half treble, a treble, double treble, oops, treble, half treble, and then into the top of the cluster, which is this stitch slightly to the right, a double crochet. So chain space, half treble, treble, double treble, treble, half treble, and then a double crochet into the top of the cluster. And you do that all the way around, and then in the last chain space, half treble, treble, double treble, treble, half treble, then pull your yarn through to do an invisible join over the top of that double crochet there. Okay, and I shall meet you back there. Okay, now we're back at the end of round 3, and it's the invisible join. So you see the double crochet that you started with, and that's the stitch that you're making. So you go into the front to back, the next stitch, pull it through, and then back through the top of your half treble, and voila. And just sew the ends in. And then if you pull the starting stitch tight, it makes it a bit smaller. So round 4, this is the dark red. And again, the pattern says to start with a slip stitch and a chain and then a stitch back into the stitch that you slipped into, that I feel makes a very bulky stitch. So again, I'm going to start with a standing double crochet. So this is a nice quick round. So into the top of any one of your pointy bits, so that's the double treble, you're going to do a standing double crochet. So in through, yarn over, pull through, and through both, same as we have done. Don't pull this one particularly tight because you're going to be slipping into it when you get round. So this round is very simple. It is double crochet into the top of the double treble from the previous round, 6 chains, 1, 2, 3, 4, oops, 5, 6, double crochet into the top of the next peak. So all the way around till you get to back to the double crochet and just slip stitch into that double crochet, and I shall meet you there. Okay, here we are, and I've got my 6 chain, and I'm just going to slip stitch into the top of the double crochet, the standing double crochet, from the beginning of the round. Now, okay, pull that tight. So the pattern says to do a chain at this point and then do 7 double crochet into the chain space, but I don't think it's necessary, and it sort of gives you an extra stitch, so you can just go ahead and just do 7 double crochet into the 6 chain space. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, oops, 7, and then a double crochet into the top of the double crochet from the previous round. So there you go. So into each of the chain spaces, 7 double crochet and then a double crochet into the top of the double crochet from the previous round until you get back to the beginning. Again, the pattern says do your 7 double crochet into there and then a double crochet into the top of this stitch, but that means again you'll end up with a bigger stitch, so I just slip stitch, do an invisible join at this point. Gives you all the stitches that you need without the extra bulk, because the way the pattern works, you would have slip stitched into there, done a chain, done a double crochet into it, come all the way around, done another double crochet into it, done your double crochets into the chain spaces, come around and done another double crochet into that, and you would have ended up with a very bulky stitch. So I shall meet you back here and I shall show you the invisible join at this point. Okay, so we're now back to the end of round 5, I think it is. Yep. And again, the pattern says to do a double crochet into this stitch here. You can see it. But I find that if you just do an invisible join making that stitch, you get a much neater finish. So what you should have, leave that stitch for the moment. You've got 7 double crochet into this chain space, 1 into the top of the double crochet, so 7 and 1, 8, 16, 24, 32, oh dear, 40, 48, 56, and you've got 7 here, and you need this extra stitch to make your 64, so you need to have that one. So through front to back, and that's the first of the double crochet in that chain space, and then back through the last of those and pull it snug-ish, because you're going to need it. So as you see, this stitch is difficult to see because of all the ends, but it looks roughly the same as the others, and then sew your ends in. So the next round is the lipstick, and this is where you're going to be making your corners. And again, I think the pattern is not very clear, so I shall hopefully explain it a bit better. So mostly these are just trebles, and the corner is double treble, 3 chain, double treble, and I think it's the starting point that I don't quite understand from the pattern. So again, a standing treble, and it's where you start that is the crucial bit. So I'm going to move along from the join, so you can see that that is the double crochet on top of the double crochet from the previous round, and you need to start in the next stitch. So that's the first double crochet in one of the chain spaces. So find your double crochet on top of your double crochet and into the next stitch. So it would have helped if I'd had the yarn on the hook. So back to front as well. So there's your double crochet on top of your double crochet, and this is the first one in the chain space. So yarn over, hold it firm, and in there. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. So that's the first of your trebles, and this is going to be your last corner. So into the next 14 stitches, I think it is. Oop, that's not good. You're going to do a treble. 1, 2, 3, it's a bit of a tangle. 4, no, my yarn is splitting. It's very, very warm at the moment. So you're going into every single stitch, the 7 double crochets in the chain space and the double crochet on top of the double crochet and another one. I've lost count now. So you should know when you're right, because your last one is the stitch before the double crochet on top of the double crochet. I think that should be right. So let's have a little count. There should be 15 altogether, so you've got your standing treble plus 14 more. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. Yay. So now we're in the corner. So double treble. Double treble. 1, 2, 3. Another double treble into the same stitch. 3 chain. 1, 2, 3, and then 2 more double trebles into the same place. My yarn's tangled. Okay, so there's your corner. So then it's 15 trebles across these 2 arches and a corner into there, 15 trebles, corner, 15 trebles, and you'll end up back here to do the corner there and an invisible join to there. Okay, and I shall meet you back there. Okay, so I've now finished round 6 and I've joined with an invisible join to the top of the first standing treble. So it's definitely worth counting your stitches, make sure that you're right. You should have 19 stitches across each side and then a 3 chain space. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19, and there should be around each side. You will find probably at this point that it's not lying very flat. I find if I push it over my knee and use the warmth of my hand and the warmth of my leg to flatten it out, and it does improve when you block it at the end. So the last round is the same round that I think all the squares are. So you start in a corner, a standing treble, so another treble into the chain space, 3 chain, 1, 2, 3, and 2 more trebles to make your corner. and then it's one treble into each of the trebles from the previous row and the double trebles in the corner. So 1, 2, they're the double trebles from the previous, oops, and again. And then one into each of the trebles, into the double trebles, and then a corner again. So again, I shall just meet you back there, and your square will be done. So here we are at the end of round 7, and it is just the invisible join finish off. So into the second stitch, front to back, into the back of the last treble, pull it so it's the same size as all the other stitches, tighten off the previous one and go back over to sew your ends in. There. So there you go, you have now finished square 1. I thought I might talk about the joining of the squares. So right sides together and identify the corner chain. So that'll be that one there. I'm just going to snip off some yarn. Very difficult to find an end. Right, I'm just going to use a contrasting yarn just so you can see. So you identified the back centre chain, and just picking up the top loop, pull through. Leave yourself a good long end, don't sew it in, because invariably at some point you will get to the other end and realise that you have missed a stitch somewhere and have to pull it out. Okay, so that's the start on the back square, and then if you just tip the corner of the front square forward and again identify the middle chain. So that is this one here, and pick up the top loop there, pull it through, and as I said, just leave that end quite happily. So then you're picking up the back top loop of the back square, and the front top loop of the front square. Once you get really practiced with it, you don't need to pick them up one at a time, but it's worth it at the beginning, just picking up that one and picking up that one until you're comfortable with it. You don't even need to pull it tight at this point, because you can pull it tight later. So top loop back, top loop at the front, and then as I said, as you get more familiar with it, you can just pick up the two, and as long as you have counted properly and you've got the right number of stitches on each square, you should get to the end and you'll have the last treble to join, and then the first chain and then the second chain, and that takes you properly to the corner. And when you pull it tight and open it up, you won't have the dots because you'll be using the same colour as one of your squares. It gives you a nice line, which is the front loop of the trebles. So I hope that helps.